How y'all doing? Now today I'm gonna show you how I built my toolbox / step stool. Now I got this idea this past Christmas from trying to hang some lights, but all I had was like a little baby stool, and that thing did not feel right. It was not made for big man like me. So I had to go out and build my own. But you know me, can't just make no simple toolbox with, step stool. You know what I'm saying? I gotta do it all and some more. So what I did is put a little artwork in there, put a little depth in there, put some color in there. So now I can set this thing anywhere I want. I can set it in my living room, I can put it in my kitchen, anywhere it sits is gonna look good, because it looks like a piece of art. Ain't nobody gonna say, why you got this clunky toolbox sitting in your living room? Nah, they gonna say, whew, what's that sitting in your living room? So stay tuned, I'm gonna show you how to do it. All right, first things first is we're gonna figure out how big we want the top. So I just stood on a piece of wood and kind of just felt what would feel right and just marked it out. Then you wanna just define that line a little more, get it stretched out. It's time to cut. So I cut it out just roughly right here, just to kind of get it decent, and then brought it over to the table saw to make sure it's, perfectly straight and aligned right. So my table saw didn't extend all the way, so I had to use a straight track to cut the other side of the wood. It was about 13 inches, and then just double check it. Always double check, make sure your stuff is aligned right and looking good. So here I'm measuring out the sides of the box. This is gonna depend on how tall you want your box or stool to be. Mine, I measured just under 9 inches, so that with the top, it was about 9.5 inches total. Then just take it over to the table saw and let it rip. Now it's always good to practice your cut on the table saw before you actually turn it on and rip it. You always want to make sure you're comfortable with it, your hands are going to be in the right spot, and it feels good. If it don't feel good, then don't do it. And this one just didn't feel right to me. So what I wound up doing is just pulling out the straight track and getting it cut down, to a smaller level, and then taking it over to the table saw to make sure it's nice and straight. All right, now we got both of our boards cut out to the right height, and they are looking good. Now we need to figure out the width. So what I did is just take the top of the box and mark it up. This is right where it's gonna basically insert, so it's gonna fit perfect. And then just cut it out. And there we go, looking good, looking crispy. Next, we need to figure out how deep we want this box. I made mine pretty deep. If I could go back, I might make it a little more shallower, but either way it worked out and looks good. So you just want to mark it roughly and then figure out what the exact is. Get over to your table saw and rip it out. Came out looking good, perfect 6 inches. Now here we're trying to figure out how wide we're gonna need the front and back pieces to be. So what I did is just use the 2 side pieces and put those on the top of the box, and then use that as like a template to cut the sides of the pieces, because it's gonna go right in between the middle of it. As you see, it fits right in the middle and is lined up perfect. Now we need to mark out where we're going to put our pocket holes. It's gonna depend on how big your board is, how many of these you're gonna need. Mine was 6 inches, so I did 3 lines like you see here on each side of the board, and also put what direction they're gonna be going. To line this up right, on that line, we wanna use these 2 points on the top and bottom. Make sure the line's right there on that top and bottom, and it should line up nice with the line you made, and everything should work out good. Now you wanna do this to both the front and back pieces of wood, and those are gonna clamp into the sides. And there we go. Now just give it a light sanding. This is just to kind of get off those little frail ends and stuff like that. We don't want to mess with this too much because we don't want to take off of the actual line, so everything fits good. Now we ready to glue it up. Just put some glue on each side and line these things up. anytime I'm lining something up with these pocket screws or pocket holes, I always use a wood clamp to kind of get everything lined up and, you know, looking good before I screw it in. This always, you know, works better than trying to just screw it in, because it's gonna move if you don't. So now we just simply just screw it in, turn it around, do the same thing on the other side. And there we go. You see everything buttoned up, looking nice, looking right. Just gonna let that sit overnight and then unclamp it. Now that one, try to stick a little extra glue on that one. Get it. There we go. Okay guys, so we got the first part done. We got the nice little box. Before we go putting the top on and bottom and getting the rest done, let's make sure it's nice and sturdy. So I'm gonna step on this thing for the first time to see if it's good and sturdy. Oh yeah, that feels good. Yeah, that feels good. That feels nice and sturdy. Yeah, I don't feel like it's going nowhere. That feels good, I like it.
Marcus,
continue on. You hear that? What was that? Did you hear that? You hear that? What? Don't be scared. It's just marcusforyou.com, where you can get all your perfume, your cologne, leather jackets, a little bit of everything. I want y'all to check that website out. Again, that's marcusforyou.com. Next, we ready to make the bottom of the box. So for this, all I had to do is just measure the size of the box, and that's basically gonna be the bottom. And cut it out. So I just roughly cut it out. I didn't make it perfect. I just roughly cut it out so I could bring it over to this table saw, and then I could get it, you know, perfect, and just get it, you know, just take off basically like a hair at a time until it just snugly fit in there. Now we're ready to measure out where we're gonna put our screws. I did 1 inch from the edge and then 4 inches from that. So it came with 4 screws total on each side. And then I used this middle part of the wood. This is just like a scrap piece, but this shows where that bottom piece is gonna line up. So now when we do use our drill bit, we know we're drilling right into the middle of it, because we're using this as almost a template, so you know what's beneath this basically. And it worked out great. Now we're ready to drill some pilot holes. Another good thing to use is a little piece of painter's tape, so you can figure out the depth, how far you need it to go down in, so you don't drill too much. Now just glue it up and we can pop that top on. Now before I screw this in, what I did is use a large drill bit. I don't have a countersink bit to, you know, have those screws sit flush. So this is what I had to do. But like I always say, don't complain about what you don't got. Make what you got work for you. Now we ready to screw this down. Now what I did is screw in all 4 corners first, and then, you know, screw the middle in. I think it always lines up better this way when you do the top, bottom, you know, and then the middle. And there we go. Look good. All flush, as you can see on there. That one went a little bit too deep, but hey, it still worked out. Everything looks nice on there. Next, we're gonna sand it. Now everything lined up pretty good. It's just a couple millimeters off, so we just want to make everything, you know, nice and smooth on there. Now we're ready to make the handles on the side. How I do this is just get a hole saw and trace it out, and we just want to overlap the tracing of it. And what this is going to create is like a little humps on the bottom of it. You're gonna see in a second. I know you don't believe it yet, but just wait. Now you want to just drill in halfway through. You don't want to drill all the way through, because then it's going to mess up the other side and it won't look right. And there we go. See them 3 little humps on the bottom? That's gonna hold your hand in a perfect position. I told you it would work. Next, we're gonna use a Dremel tool to kind of buzz this down, shape it up just a little bit more, and make it nice and smooth so it ain't cutting you when you're grabbing the box. So we got it done most of the way with the Dremel tool. And then I just by hand took some sandpaper and just smoothed it out. And there we go. That's the final result. Yeah, that looks smooth, feels right. Now we're just gonna use the router tool to round off the edges, just so it gives it a better look, you know. And there we go. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I like it. Now we ready to paint. I used this Pittsburgh paint. It's like a little flat paint. I did the same thing on my computer desk. If you want to check that out, there's a link right here. Now here I ran into a little bit of problem. I rounded off the corner of the lid, and now the box doesn't match it. So I'm gonna have to sand it off. I know I just painted it, but hey, we gotta make sure it's right. And there we go. Now you can see it's nice and flush on there. That's how we want it. And I did the same thing with the other sides of the boxes just to make sure everything was nice and flush. This painter's tape to hold it down worked really good. I suggest doing that. Now I used a little bit of this spackle. This is some good stuff. It starts out pink and then changes to white when it's dry. I used this to fill these little holes like you see right there. Also on the sides of the boxes it had some little holes. After I seen that black paint on there, then you can see all the little imperfections. So you just want to take a little dip of this and fill any holes or anything that's not right. Same thing on the sides. Now these sides didn't necessarily, you know, have big holes or nothing in it, but with this plywood, you know, it's never really perfectly flat, and this helped it out a lot. Now you see it's white now. Now it's time to sand it. Now we're just gonna sand it so it's nice and smooth like we want it, and we got no extras on there. Same thing with the sides. Just make sure everything's nice and smooth. You don't want a lot of this stuff on there. This is just to kind of fill the little holes and the imperfections that this thing had. Now we're ready to paint it again. This time I used a roller. The first time I used a brush just because, you know, that's what I'm used to using. But once I did it with this roller, man, this thing turned out way better. It's not many, you can't see all them streaks and stuff like that. And it turned out more uniformed. Now we ready to add some flavor to this thing, some depth, some little personal touches. Now you can do whatever you want. I use my logo, of course, Tools and Ish. I just printed it off the computer, used the glue stick to glue it down, and then just used the Dremel tool to, you know, carve it out. First, I just, you know, carved out just the edge of it, you know, just to get it in there first, and then go through and, you know, get it deeper and deeper and deeper until I got it just perfect the way I want it. Now peeling this thing off wasn't too bad. Most of it just came off by hand. Then the rest I had to use a little putty knife. Now you want to be careful with this putty knife so you ain't scratching up this wood. But as long as you know, be careful with it, it'll work right. And I didn't have any problems with this. It looks a little tedious, but that's about it. So now we're just gonna put some depth in there. You know, we want to get it deeper in there. This is gonna do two things. It's gonna look cool because, you know, it's got some depth to it, you know, and also this is going to help you with grip when you're standing on this thing. It'll have a little indent right there, so basically more grip for your feet. Here we're gonna use the same paint that we use for the bottom of the box or stool. This is gonna help tie in the top from the bottom and just make it, you know, look, you know, more together. Make it look all like it was supposed to be like this, not just it was thrown together. And there we go. Look at that texture, that depth. Woo, yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. These are some samples. I just want to test it out and kind of see what color combination I really wanted. I wound up going with these bottom three right here. These are the dyes that I use for the colors. It's called Folk Art Ultra Dye. So I just traced around everything. I started from light to dark. I think that gives it a nice contrast, especially with this black being right here. And then just continued on, one color to the next, and then repeat the steps. There's the final result. Look at all that color. Woo, I'm loving it. Now we ready to seal this thing up. I just used some gloss lacquer. I had to thin it out a little bit to work with my Home Right paint sprayer, and it worked so good until right there. It spit out like a little black paint from like the last time that I used it or something. Luckily it didn't ruin it though. I wiped it off real quick, which I know is a no-no, but hey, I had to do it. I couldn't leave that little black blotch on there. I couldn't do it. But luckily it worked, and all the other coats worked out good. Did about 4 in total. Now we're ready to paint the back of the top of the box. Real simple, nothing to it. Now this was the hard part, putting on these hinges. Whew, I had some trouble with this. Now that painter's tape, it helped, keep everything in place. I just used a little nail to kind of get the center of the hole right there. And it was working good until right here. You can't see it, but bam, my fucking bit broke off right in the middle of the damn thing and didn't work. So I had to scoot it over a little bit and then redo it. Now what you really need when you're putting on hinges is a center finding drill bit. That'll eliminate it being a little bit off or whatever, and it'll be perfect. But hey, we work with what we got, like I always say. Now this painter tape works really good. It holds you down real tight like glue. And then we're just gonna do some pilot holes and drill this thing in. We're gonna unite the top to the bottom, and there we go. It didn't work out perfect. Like I said, if we had that center finding drill bit, it would have been perfect, but it works. It opens and closes and doesn't have any problems, and it lines up. The box around everything lines up good. Now we're gonna need this chain to hold the top from flopping open too much. Now those hinges work fine, but they don't stop where they're supposed to or where you want them to. So this chain is gonna let that top sit back a little bit, but not, flop all the way open and, possibly mess up your hinges. So I couldn't find a box, chain for it. So I just used, a random chain that I found at Menards. Easily take it apart and just take a little tiny piece that you need. And then I just use some tiny little screws to hold this thing in. I did do a tiny little pilot hole just to kind of, get it started, and then just screwed it in. You don't want to, do too much with like a, a drill or something like that and tighten it too much. And there we go. It's nice and simple. It's simple, but it works. Now this is the final little touch. It's just a little tap light to put on there. It's got a little sticky pad on the back, makes it easy to put on. This just gives it a little bit of light, it's a dark box, so we just, want a little light in there. Woo, we done. Man, look at that color. So vibrant. That design just makes it pop. Look at that function. It's working good, looking even better. Woo, let's not forget about that depth. I'm loving it. Till next time, appreciate it.